I've been a cop for a little over 15 years now. Dang, time really flies. I grew up in this town knowing my mailman by name, going to the farmer's market on Saturdays for my vegetables, and actually attending our monthly town halls. It's quite the small life. My rookie year on the job, for the most part, involved DUI arrests of the same 5 guys and traffic control for local parades. However, one night, I was driving down the road and noticed a red reflector in the bushes on the side of the road. I eased my foot off the gas and coasted towards the light before realizing it was a laid-down motorcycle. A second later, I saw the lifeless body around the guardrail. My heart sunk to my floorboards as I slammed on my brakes and came to a screeching halt. I jumped on my radio as I leapt out from the car. 112 Alpha to base. I'm on Route 76 with a motorcyclist who is unresponsive. Send medics and backup. I didn't need to check his vitals to see he was unresponsive. His body was ripped to shreds. The guardrail did less guarding, but rather acted like a cheese grater against his fragile skin. His jeans were ripped apart as easily as paper. The image is still ingrained in my mind when I close my eyes. It was quickly apparent there was nothing I could do to help him. In a matter of minutes, 2 additional officers and medics arrived on scene. I was surprised the medics didn't announce time of death on scene, but instead hauled the body onto their gurney and hurriedly drove away. Since I was first on scene, I took the report. We got notification that our John Doe didn't survive, and we treated it as a death scene. By the end of an extremely long shift, I still had to identify this guy. I searched his motorcycle and found a wallet in the stowaway compartment. Jason Dunes. He was only 22 years old and came from a nice part of town. My sergeant tasked me with notifying next of kin, so after tracking down this guy's parents, I started to drive to their house. Notifications are one of the worst parts of this job. His parents were heartbroken and assured me that he would never drink and drive and absolutely did not use any drugs. They were so persistent that he was so cautious and safe on his bike, they pushed and pushed to make sure we did our jobs correctly. I couldn't get their persistence out of my head, and my instincts told me I was missing something. I went back to the scene and drove a few miles down Route 76. I proceeded through a green light past the accident scene and slowed down around the appearing neighborhood. I skimmed the houses and noticed one with a huge spotlight. Could it be? A camera. I knocked on the door, and an older man in his robe answered. "No, what's the ruckus, officer?" I explained to him there was an accident, and I noticed he had a camera outside of his home. "Does your camera reach the street?" "You bet it does. I've had my mailbox hit 3 times now, and I want to make sure the damn city pays for it when it's their dump trucks." I was able to get a copy of the tape, and as I drove back to the station, I approached the traffic light again. Despite the green light, I slowed down. Again, I looked around and saw there was a camera. With much legal effort that I won't bore you with, I got that footage too. I watched as Jason drove his motorcycle through the intersection, followed by an older blue pickup truck. Then, a few minutes later, I watched the older man's footage and see the blue pickup truck, no motorcycle. I rewind it and slow it down. The truck had a broken headlight. I jumped back to the traffic light footage and saw the truck had not 1, but 2 headlights. This was a hit and run. I immediately took the evidence to my sergeant, who subsequently took it to our chief. They thanked me for my police work, but said they would take it from there. Again, I was a rookie cop at the time and wasn't surprised they didn't want me to take lead on a death investigation. I tried to follow up, and all they said was that it was untraceable and they never found the blue truck, so it just wasn't going to be solved. This is where things get weird. I've been working our front desk for the past few weeks while I heal from some minor shoulder surgery. A woman came into the station today and asked for the police report on Jason Dune's accident in 2005.
His accident was November 14, 2005.
He clarified. "Wow, I was actually on that call. Was that your son?" The woman gently closed her eyes and nodded her head.
Hard to believe it's been 15 years.
He looked so much different than I remembered. To be fair, she didn't seem to recognize me either, as being the one who notified her of her son's death. Perhaps it was my shaggy beard I've been growing since working the desk, or perhaps my receding hairline. Sorry to say, but since it's still technically an open case, we can't release the details to the public.
I'm not the public, I'm his mother.
She attested. I sympathize for the woman, truly. I suggested, you should have access to the official coroner's report if that could be of help to you. She huffed.
I already tried that first. They had no record of my son and told me to obtain the police report to see if that would help them with locating his autopsy report.
Let me see what I can do. I'll have to talk to my chief, but maybe we can try to help you sort this out. She appreciated my efforts and I handed her my business card. After she left, I logged into our report system and searched for Dunes, Jason. No results. I tried searching by report date next, 11/14/2005. No results. What the hell? I muttered to myself. I tried nearly 10 other search options before finally searching by reporting officer and typed out my name, Galifty. 9,872 results. I went to the last page and slowly worked my way backwards towards November 14, 2005. It wasn't there. I stared at my screen in shock that the report seemingly went missing. I stopped in my chief's office and told him the entire situation and asked him where the report could have gone. Maybe there was some system glitch or you didn't enter it right. I entered the report right. It was signed off by my sergeant at the time, who has since retired. I sensed distance and a lack of care from Chief Hawkins. His phone rang and he was quick to shoo me out of his office and close the door behind me. I was at a loss for words. I had to call Mrs. Dunes back, but I didn't know what to say. She answered.
Hello?
Hi, Mrs. Dunes. This is Officer Galifty. I'm sorry to say I didn't get much information on my end either that would help you. I really wish I could help more. I remember the case quite clearly.
It's very frustrating.
She responded.
I'm honestly relieved to hear you at least say you remember him. Everyone else treats me like I'm crazy and like there was never an accident.
I'm sorry. That must be so frustrating. I am curious, though. If you don't mind me asking, what makes you reach out for the reports now, 15 years later? I heard her take a deep breath through the phone.
Oh, you'll think I'm just crazy.
Try me.
I recently saw a local psychic. I've been having a bizarre dream where Jason yells for help and hands me a lottery ticket with letters and numbers on it. I told the psychic all about my dream and she asked me if Jason died in a car accident. I told her yes. She said Jason was trying to solve his murder through my dreams.
I didn't want to insult the woman, but I also didn't believe in that bullshit. I just said,
Well, I wrote down the numbers and letters that showed up in my dreams and asked her what they mean. She stared at the paper and then looked me right in the eyes and said I had written down the license plate of my son's murderer.
My natural investigative mind blurted out, "Tell me the license plate number." She slowly read the letters and numbers through the phone, and I repeated them back to her phonetically, making sure I had it correct.
Are you going to look into this?
She asked. I'll try, I responded. I took my scribbled writing over the computer and paused to think through my next course of action. I could check the local DMV system, but it's doubtful the current owner is the same as the one from 15 years ago. Just to be sure, I typed it in. No results. Then I searched our report system to see if we ever took a report on a vehicle with that license plate. One result. I leaned forward, attentive to my computer. My eyes were locked to the screen. I scanned the result for the date of entry. 2003-04-02. Shit, this could be the same owner. I opened the report and began reading the officer's report. On this date, affiant Officer Walsh responded to the corner of Parker Street and Walnut Street for a parking complaint. Dear Lord, I thought. One of these guys who writes in third person. I read on. Upon arriving on scene, I found a blue Ford pickup truck parked in front of a designated handicapped street parking spot. There was no owner on scene. The plate did not return. The VIN number also did not return. I towed the vehicle to our local impound lot. Short and sweet. Typical Walsh, I thought. If I recall, he was the guy who died from a heart attack on duty not too long before I was hired. Although this wasn't helpful in identifying an owner, it still meant one thing. The license plate number that Mrs. Dunes gave me matched the vehicle I saw at the scene of the accident. What are the odds? I scratched my beard as I thought of my next move. I needed to find out who owned that truck, and how did they have the power to make their plates and their VIN numbers non-returnable. The only ones I know of that can do that are government vehicles. But what would a government employee be doing with an old pickup truck? I continued to go through nearly a dozen alternative theories. Ultimately, I decided on my next step. I was going to talk to my chief. I went back to his office and said, "Chief, about that accident I spoke to you about earlier, I did some digging and found there was a tow report done for a similar vehicle 2 years prior, and it had no return on the tag or VIN. I know it's a stretch, but did you ever get anything from the truck caught on the cameras I got?" He squinted and stared through me. I wasn't sure if he was thinking, angry, annoyed, or perhaps all of the above. "I don't know what you're talking about. I've been on this job for over 25 years. I don't remember the details of cases like that." I don't know how he didn't remember one of the very few potential murder cases in this town, but I wasn't going to say that out loud. I clearly was going nowhere with him, so I left and decided I needed to pursue Plan B. It was the end of the day, and on my way home, I stopped at Mrs. Dunes. She let me inside and offered me a cup of coffee, which I graciously accepted. "Is Mr. Dunes here as well?" I asked. She stirred in a cube of sugar and quietly shook her head.
He lost his battle to cancer 2 years ago.
"I'm so sorry." I offered as an apology.
Yes, well, you know.
She trailed off. I slowly transitioned the conversation back on topic and asked, "I know it was a while ago, but did you know anyone with an older blue pickup truck? Maybe a 1990 or so Ford?" Her eyes glanced to the top right of the room as she pondered. She slowly began to shake her head no, but stopped. She rose a finger to her lips.
You know what? Yes, well, sort of.
She took a deep inhale and sipped on her coffee.
There was a truck we used to frequently see parked around the block. It was older. Nobody here knew whose it was, but several people complained about it being in front of their home.
Would any of them remember the details about the truck today?
Oh, I don't think so.
He paused and took another sip.
The biggest complainer was Mr. Hegway around the block, but he passed away. Actually, he passed just a week before Jason.
The mention of her son's name caused a quiver in her throat. She continued,
I don't think it parked for long in front of anyone else's home too much.
Was this truck intentionally following Jason? I once thought it could be a potential DUI cover-up, but I'm beginning to wonder if there's something more sinister going on. I took a large gulp to finish my coffee and thanked Mrs. Dunes for her time. I started on my way home, and despite the caffeine, found myself dozing off at the intersection. I stretched my eyes open and cracked open my window. Man, it gets dark early. As I sat at the red light, I stared at one beaming headlight from across the street. I felt a wave of chills shoot down my spine. The only way to describe it is that it felt as if I just looked into the face of evil. I proceeded through the green light, approaching the vehicle. It was a truck. I slowed my speed and noticed they hadn't even moved since the light turned green. I couldn't see anything through the windows. It was too dark, but I could see the truck. It was an old, blue Ford pickup truck. I kept driving, and after 2 seconds glanced in my rear view mirror. One headlight. It was following me. I pressed my foot towards the floorboards and sped towards my house. The headlight trailed behind. I made a left, then another left. I stopped at a stop sign and watched the headlight keep a 1-block distance. I didn't want them jumping me or knowing where I lived, so I made a third left to make a full circle. I was back to the first intersection. There was no doubt I was being followed. I stared in my rear-view mirror while slowly reaching my right hand in my armrest, pressing my fingers around the cold butt of my Glock. My fear turned into rage. If this shithead thinks they're going to intimidate me. I threw my car into park in the middle of the street. I tucked my Glock into my waistband and lifted my badge that I wore on a necklace out from my shirt. I pushed my door open with such force it nearly bounced right back shut. I rushed toward the truck, yelling, "Police, get out of the vehicle!" Then, as I was approaching the truck, I noticed something. Wait, there were two headlights, and the truck wasn't old. It was a nice, new truck. It also wasn't blue or even a Ford. A young man exited the trunk with his hands in the air. He looked like a deer in headlights. "Were you following me?" I yelled. "No," he pleaded. "I'm sorry, sir. I was just leaving my girl's house and headed into work night shift downtown at the Easy Mart." This guy was just a kid. He was barely out of high school and probably driving his dad's truck. I sent him on his way and watched him continue on past me. Did I just imagine that whole thing? I tucked my gun back into the center arm console, put my car into drive, and checked my mirrors. One single headlight flashed its light at me. I tried to force my eyes open, but my brain halted any attempts to wake up and instead kept sending me back to my dreams. I tried again. Wake up. I tried to wiggle my fingers, but couldn't even do that much. I was able to get my eyes open, but the rest of my body didn't get the memo. I laid there, paralyzed, trying to snap myself out of it. I never had sleep paralysis before. I've heard about it, but hadn't experienced it until that morning. I closed my eyes, accepting defeat, and let myself drift back to sleep. As soon as I drifted away, I was met with the image of the blue truck. The one headlight flashed 3 times. Without realizing it, I was walking towards the truck. I glanced down at my feet. Now I was on a motorcycle. The dream was just one constant motion. The handlebars began to wobble, and I used every muscle in my arms to maintain control. My shoulder began throbbing in pain from where my injury was. Wait, this is a dream. Why do I feel pain? My heart stopped when I felt the entire tire slide out from under me. Everything moved in slow motion, and I watched the guardrail get closer and closer to me. Right upon impact, I gasped for air and found myself nearly falling off my bed. Thank God I was awake. I rolled onto my side and used my arm to push myself upright. Ow! I yelled. My shoulder was in excruciating pain. What the? I mumbled in question to myself. There was something more to my dream. I didn't know if it was even really a dream or what to call it. I wasn't awake. I wasn't asleep. I felt every touch and every pain throughout the dream. I was truly experiencing it. The voice in the back of my head told me I needed to look into the motorcycle accident again. As I mentioned, the reports were lost, but I had another idea. I picked up my phone and gave an old friend a call. "Hey, Zeke, how's it going?" I asked.
"Hey man, it's good. Same. Another day, another car." Oh,
Zeke coughed into the phone.
Damn. Sorry about that.
Zeke was in his 70s and had been smoking for probably over 60 years. He worked in the coal mines as a kid and dropped out from school in 10th grade to take over his dad's impound lot when his dad died. This poor man basically supported his mother and sisters from the time he was 16 years old. Zeke and I go way back. He used to be my neighbor growing up, and when I started on the force, I saw him regularly because we've always used his lot to store impounded vehicles. "I'm actually calling for a favor. Do you mind if I swing by to take a look through the lot?" Zeke was more than happy to help, and off I went. When I arrived, I told him I was looking for a motorcycle that was involved in an accident from 2005. He squinted and fiddled with his glasses, as if he was actually looking for the answer.
Well, I have a whole section of motorcycles. You don't happen to know what the make and model, would you?
I quickly called Mrs. Dunes and was relieved when she knew all of the information I needed. I responded, "It looks like I'm looking for a 2003 Honda CBR 1100 XX Super Blackbird."
Ah, yes. Those Honda CB series are hot commodities around here. Everyone seems to like fixing those up.
Zeke guided me through the maze of scrap metal, cars, and everything in between until we reached an entire lot full of motorcycles. He was surprisingly incredibly well organized. He knew the exact row and area the bike would be in, if it was there. Mrs. Dunes also gave me the license plate number and VIN she was able to grab from the original insurance and registration cards. I was impressed how quickly she had retrieved them from her files, too. I walked down the row, and like a child in a store, I struck my finger along each one. I skimmed for license plates and checked the models, and as I trailed my finger along the metal, I felt my finger burn as if I just grazed a hot skillet. I grabbed my finger and let out a few cuss words. Zeke stared at me confused, but then looked at the bike.
Well, I'll be damned,
he said.
Isn't that the one you were looking for?
I released my finger and looked down. That was it. I slowly walked around the bike, inspecting every side. It was mangled, but not beyond repair. I grabbed the handlebars and gave them a shake. They felt wobbly. I don't know much about bikes, but Zeke did. I asked him to take a look at them and let me know what kind of shape it was in. He grabbed his toolbox from his truck and spent several minutes taking apart the bike. He explained to me in greater detail than I could comprehend what was going on with the bars. I shook my head and said, "Wait, what?" In normal language. He answered slowly and sarcastically.
Someone fucked with this bike.
Jason's death was a murder, but not the hit and run I suspected. I told Zeke to hold on to the bike and that I'd be back for it. I left his lot and went to Mrs. Dunes with my newfound knowledge. She sat there quietly, taking in the information.
But who would want Jason dead?
She asked, but knew there was no answer I could offer. I shook my head. I was hoping you might have an idea, or who had access to his bike before he left that night. He thought for a moment.
He was on his way home from his friend's house that night. Kevin Walsh.
Where do I know that name from? Then I remembered. Officer Walsh had a son named Kevin who was a district attorney. I even had a case or two go through him. What are the chances that Officer Walsh's son was best friends with Jason and the same blue truck was around them both just before they died? I knew I had to go pay Kevin a visit. I thanked Mrs. Dunes for her help, and while it was still daylight, I headed downtown to the district attorney's office. I threw my car in the park and began walking towards the entrance when I felt my phone vibrate. It was my day off from work, so I was surprised when I saw Chief Hawkins calling me. "Hello, Chief?" I answered.
"You need to fucking stop,"
he demanded. "Stop what?" I asked.
"I just spoke with Zeke. He told me about your little visit. What's your obsession with this old case from 15 years ago?"
"So you do remember the accident?" I spat out.
"You need to fucking drop it."
Then I heard the line go dead. I checked my screen. He hung up. The last thing in the world I would do right now is drop it. And scene. I know that's quite the cliffhanger. There is a bit more, not really to this story, but the Sun has some posts titled, "I'm a cop and I need to solve my father's last case." So it is linked to this one. However, the author hasn't finished that one. So I didn't read it here because I didn't want it to be unfinished. So I'm just leaving you on this cliffhanger instead. If the author listens to this story and maybe is inspired to finish that one off, I would love to do it if they would allow me. But for now, this was the story. I really enjoyed it. It was I'm not sure where it's gonna go. I'm really curious. I haven't done too many cop stories or anything on the channel. I've really wanted to do a PI story, but I never really found one. Well, I do have a CSI story coming up, so that is coming up. But yeah, I want to do some detective stuff, or I'm not sure. I listened to the Neverglades mysteries recently, the whole 8 hours. But yeah, I really like that. Anyways, I hope you all enjoyed this story. I'm sorry about the cliffhanger, but I hope you liked it. Thank you so much for listening. I will see you in the next one. Much love, ego, volt, anima, vestra.